Welcome to the Calgary Environmental Roundtable Municipal Election campaign, led by the Gravity Well podcast with me, Jenny Yeremy. The Calgary Environmental Roundtable, or CERT for short, is a nonpartisan coalition of environmental and climate organizations working together to ensure that water, nature, and climate are front of mind and that our members have an ongoing opportunity to shape the future of our city. Through our candidate questionnaire, mayoral and ward podcast panels, and voter engagement tool, CERT is connecting residents with candidates, elevating environmental priorities, and empowering Calgarians to make informed choices at the ballot box. Municipal decisions directly affect the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the communities we live in. As Calgary continues to grow, we must prioritize clean water, biodiversity, and bold climate action to ensure a safe and thriving city for generations to come. Our list of supporters is growing. Reach out to add your organization. Send your candidates and network the CERT questionnaire. Encourage their participation and ongoing relationship building with their representatives. Remember to follow, like, subscribe, and share the Gravity Well podcast. Together we can build a resilient, healthy, and sustainable city for all Calgarians. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the CERT Building a Greener Future for Calgary Municipal Election 2025 podcast mini-series. This is for you to learn more about your ward and mayoral candidates. Today, I will be speaking with two of your council candidates for Ward 2, Jennifer Wyness and Trevor Cavanaugh. I will bring them on stage after a little housekeeping. So as the intro suggests, the Calgary Environmental Roundtable is a climate, environment, and common good focused group of groups working together to ensure that water and nature and biodiversity are front of mind and that our members understand they have an ongoing opportunity to shape the future of our city. Preet Kang of the Alberta Environmental Network is our leader. You will see more of Preet through this series. She co-hosted the campaign launch with me. Municipal decisions directly affect the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the communities we live in. The goal of this campaign is to connect you with your candidates, elevate environmental and common good priorities, and empower you and your fellow Calgarians to make informed choices at the ballot box and beyond. Thank you again to Jeremy Farkas for Mayor and Ali Unwala for Ward 1 for kicking off the conversations. You can check out their conversations with me and Kathleen Johnson on the Gravity Well with Jenny Yeremy YouTube page, as well as on my website under the CERT campaign. The links will be included in this live stream for you. So CERT is grateful for the opportunity to highlight candidates' vision of a green Calgary in our exclusive and panel interviews. And we're excited to hear from Jennifer and Trevor today. But first, this campaign will be most successful because of you. So please use this QR code that I've got on the top of your screen to get more candidates to respond. We have about 25 candidates across the city who have responded so far. That's only about 35% though, Calgary. So please get that commitment from the rest of your candidates to see their responses to these important questions. I'm excited to announce that we have what looks like commitment to almost every conversation we're hosting for the wards. I'm looking for somebody in Ward 5 right now, it looks like, but we'll see if we can fill each of these ward conversations. And our the two top candidates for mayor have agreed to do the mayoral forum on October 2nd at 7 p.m. So tune in for that. Jim McPhail will be co-hosting with me on behalf of the Calgary Climate Hub. So again, please use the QR code, reach out to your candidates, ask them to fill in our questionnaire and come on these podcasts to hear from them directly. So lastly, you will amplify this opportunity for your community. Please share it with them, and it'll amplify your efforts as well. And note that candidates hold a range of environmental positions and priorities and objectives. This is not a debate, this is a forum. So positions taken by participants either individually or collectively don't necessarily represent those of the Calgary Environmental Roundtable as a whole. Again, CERT and this campaign do not endorse or recommend any candidates or political parties. Lastly, please remember to follow, like, and subscribe to the Gravity Well podcast. Together, we can build a resilient and healthy and sustainable city for all Calgarians. All right, now I finally get a chance to bring on our guests. So I'm going to start with Jennifer welcome to the show, Jennifer. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Jennifer Wyness has an extensive background in public relations and mediation. She has more than a decade of experience working with corporations, nonprofits, and government organizations, working on outreach programs and conflict mediation. Prior to working in public relations and mediation, she also worked as a manager for a recreation facility for almost 15 years. Her qualifications include a bachelor's of kinesiology with a minor in sociology, a diploma of public relations, and an emergency medical responder certificate. Wonderful stuff. So Jennifer was elected to Ward 2 in 2021. She is now the vice chair of audit of the police commissioner and a member of the infrastructure planning committee. She looks forward to finding innovative ways to provide high quality services to Calgarians. And I read in your updated bio for your candidacy that you have trust is a very strong value for you, and that you want to help make sure that people know that you are committed to following through on the things that you've, and your voting record is a proof of that. So I'll stop there. Is there anything I missed in your bio that you'd like to add, Jennifer?
Some people like the fun fact that I have 10,000 nautical miles on the ocean. So it's,
wow. Very cool. Yeah. And you and I have a small connection in that we both ran for the Alberta Party at other times. So I know you ran in was it the 2019 election, right?
Yeah. There's lots of fun facts. Like even I've done my Institute of Corporate Directors course. So I keep learning. I'm a lifelong learner.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So I'll bring Trevor up for us as well. Welcome, Trevor. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for organizing this. So appreciate it.
Wonderful. So Trevor Cavanaugh is a professional engineer and with an MBA and over 15 years experience in solving complex challenges in infrastructure planning and fiscal management. He's running to ensure that Ward 2 gets practical, lasting solutions to keep our community safe, strong, and thriving. Calgary thrives when we balance responsible growth with a strong community value, is what he believes. And he thinks that Ward 2 deserves leadership that understands our local concerns and is committed to practical solutions. Welcome to the show, Trevor. I really appreciate you running for council and for being here.
Yep, thank you very much. That's one of the big reasons I wanted to run, was just to make sure that people from Ward 2 are being heard, like downtown. So that was kind of one of our big concerns that we wanted to run. And just to note, most of my experience, a lot of it as a professional engineer, has been around the environmental landscape. So really appreciate you asking these questions. So very relevant. So
wonderful. Yeah, thank you for being here. Okay, so I'm going to lead us off in a couple roundtables. Maybe we'll go back and forth. I'll just direct that when it happens. But so we'll just run through the questions. So starting with question 1. Calgary's climate strategy outlines 5-year goals to reduce energy poverty and utility costs, creating clean economy jobs, improving public health, and building more equitable, climate-resilient communities. If elected or re-elected, how will you work to achieve these outcomes for Calgarians? Jennifer, I'll let you go first, please.
Thank you. This is a loaded question when you really think about what's going on in the orders of government and what controls the city of Calgary has. So when we look at energy poverty, there's limited levers we can pull because it's a regulated business, and the cost to expand the infrastructure is quite prohibitive, especially with the investment that needs to happen in interprovincial energy movement. We've had reports come out that our grid system needs massive capital investment, but between BC Hydro and the province of Alberta to maintain a stable grid network. At the same time, we're pushing for a quick greening of the energy without acknowledging how I like to use the term energy gluttonous we are. When you think about, we're all using technology, we're plugged in, we have a lot of phones going on, charging and taking from the system, but we're not actually moving the system to where it needs to be. We can put solar panels up, but yet you still need a battery bank to store it in. When I lived on the ocean, this is where I really learned about the interconnectedness of our MacBooks and our technology, because I had to run off grid in where I had trade winds and I had solar, and I had about 12 hours of solar a day. And when I would run my iMac, it would drain my battery bank, and that would give me 3 hours, and I'd have to sacrifice my fridge. Now we look at what we're putting in our homes. We're having smart fridges, which are putting computer screens in. They're not just taking the basic energy use. They're taking more, constant drain. If you leave your phone chargers in, you're taking from a grid system that we're constantly have to produce for. And so when we look and ask a counselor to say, hey, how do we fix this? One, it comes down to education. It comes down to how do we make sure we educate where our consumption is coming from, and just help people learn to make little changes. Like in my office, we do newsletters and help give fun tips out to people. And they can choose to make that change or not. And where you're really struggling when you make these goals, we now have the federal government changing mandates and investments that they have encouraged over the last 4 years of this term. And so whereas I sit in re-election, I'm kind of going, what council was told to do for the last 4 years is now shifting under kind of the new management of the federal government. So what I really look at when you're at the councillor level, it's about trying to maintain a plan that is like bite-sized, logical, and within your order of government and your realm of control. But where you struggle is right now, even in this election, I'm watching people ask councillors and this council to go above, like to stretch in a way where we don't have the support to actually make these changes, where the systems in place that are incentivized by the federal government are not in place. I can even go down into EV buses, like
perhaps we'll move forward. Thank you, Jennifer. That's great.
I can go on. Like this is a loaded one that
I understand. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Trevor, you're next, please.
Yeah, thank you. One of the big things with a 5-year plan is, are you actually following the plan each year, or you're just saying 5 years from now, we're going to reduce 30%, go to solar power on 30% of our houses. But how are we actually doing that? How are we tracking that? I've been in some organizations where the 5-year plan is this is what's presented. We're going to grow by 100%. And then a year later, they present the same 5-year plan without any actual action. So one of the things that I like to focus on is, making sure that we're looking at accountable metrics each year for the city, that if we're actually going to try to target this 5-year plan, how are we going to do it? How are we going to track it? One of the things for myself, for my house, we did a retrofit of light bulbs through the Alberta plan. And with that reduced our monthly bill by about 30%. So our bill, whenever we get our bill from ENMAX, it mentions that we're kind of one of the households that have the lowest use. So there's opportunities that we can do retrofits, especially focus on some of the older buildings, and make a plan where we can actually spend some money effectively, not just throwing it away. We want to create a plan, but focus on where it's going to make the most bang for the buck. And so that was one of the things that we want to focus on, and kind of doing some short-term planning on how we're going to actually meet these 5-year goals. I've checked what the 2050 goals were. They seem a little bit just grabbing some numbers out of the air. So like saying that 60% of residential houses will have solar panels, and that's going to be how we're going to supply electricity. But with the amount of hail, if we're having a really cold spell, how is 60% of solar panels going to really actually keep the heat on in the city? So the short-term 5-year plan makes sense, but looking at some of the numbers for the 2050 plan, I'd like to hear more on like how they're actually going to accomplish that. So, in the short term, I'd like to focus on the 5-year plan, and there's things that we can do, making sure that within the city that we're actually tracking and have a plan, not just say we're going to be doing this in 30% in 5 years, but how are we actually going to do it?
Wonderful. Okay, so I'll just reflect a bit of what I heard from both of you before I move into the next question. So from you, Jennifer, I heard that we have to think about the regulation of the business and where the jurisdiction is to move Calgary forward in the future. You see a very big importance of people understanding their use and how we are adding to the system, and education is going to be key to help people understand how to get us back into alignment in terms of future use. You do see some concerns from the federal level as to whether or not the city will be able to achieve the goals, especially with potentially a moving target, it sounds like. And that's sort of everything I captured from you. And I'll just offer from Trevor as well that so you want to track the plan. You want to make sure that you're looking at it on an annual basis, not a 5-year increment, and find out that you're back at the same place and need to start over again. Sounds like you have some concerns around solar deployment, whether or not we will be able to keep up with that demand and what that means in terms of the annual weather impacts of those things. Yeah, I think I'm thinking of some of our broader membership like Solar Alberta and perhaps, places like Pembina that might be able to offer some of the answers to those things. Okay, so how will you ensure, so I'll go the other way now. So Trevor, you can lead this one. How will you ensure that new community development and redevelopment in Calgary protects our watersheds, river and creek valleys, wetlands, and the wildlife and urban biodiversity that depend on these ecosystems? Thank you.
Yeah, so my previous experience, I've been involved with a lot of environmental assessments where you're looking into the impact. And part of one of the problems with this type of tracking where we're building, where we're not thinking ahead, where we're going back, we built it and then we realize, well, we forgot about this wetland here, and then we have to spend an additional money to do reclamation work. So one of the big things with protecting the wetlands is making sure you're making the proper decisions up front, doing the proper assessments, and then things go smoothly so you don't have to, when you're starting to develop, realize, oh, there's a bird nest here where we have to spend additional money and hold up the construction. So big thing is planning up first, making sure you have all your ducks in a row, making sure the ducks are safe, and then kind of moving on with the biodiversity and planning.
Wonderful. Jennifer?
So this one's another thing we've been working on, is trying to address the microclimates that are presented over the city of Calgary. We have policies that are kind of one size fits all, that are not acknowledging the differences of the microclimate that exist over the entire boundary of city of Calgary. And so I've been pushing administration to start factoring that in, especially when you look at, we can get snow in the north in Ward 2 and have zero snow in the deep south, yet our snow pattern was to put a snowmobile or snowplow everywhere, when you really just need to respond to where it is. And that shows where planning and development needs to start factoring that in. What species of grass, trees, shrubs we need to put as the metric a developer has to go in and build at the time of build out is an important shift we need to start seeing in the policy work at the city. The challenge I also have is sometimes I get reports like, I want to really unpack the Glenmore build out vote. So we're in this juggle of housing affordability and where to build it and density. And so we had that right by Glenmore, we were supposed to do a tower build, and citizens were mad because we got voted down. But yet we are the one major city in Canada that has built out density around our reservoir. No other city in Canada has built the way we have around our drinking water source. And so at that time, I had to juggle, do I protect our drinking water or do I do luxury condo development? And I chose to say no to luxury condos in order to protect our Glenmore reservoir, which we're already seeing pollutants wash into it from the developments around it. And so it was disappointing to watch the community conversation when you, as a councillor, have to start pulling back and go, I have to prioritize one or the other. And we have to look at how we've built out around the reservoir in order to protect our drinking resources, because say we have a contaminant in it, and when we've had drought years, we don't have enough water to flush our drinking water to then have it restock up. And so these are the things that are getting lost in some of our conversations around climate and housing, because they're sometimes are at opposition to each other. Another one I'm working on when it comes to this is a rogue planter program, where I want the city to come up with a list of wild native species that can kind of help outgrow weeds that community doesn't like, and maybe there's a flower species that they find more appealing that they can plant in their community. I've pushed for microclover and clover in the community because it's a great soil cleanser, and it grows because we already have had a lot of issues with our mowing contracts. And if we can actually get something that grows in our medians and boulevards that has a low cost to maintain over a period of time, it is better for our city. And it's a funny thing where when you talk climate emergency declaration, that sets everybody off because we use the term emergency when we're not responding like it is. It's a declaration. We have to stop thinking about this as an emergency and start going, it's just logical policy. Because when I talk to the community, when we actually start talking about the substance pieces of our community, what's around, do we have trees, do we have shrubs, do we have flowers? That's what people relate to. When we take the politics into it and start talking whether we're doing an emergency declaration or not, we only have to do that to get money back into the city. We lose people when we can bring everybody along. So those are some highlights. There you go.
Fantastic. Okay, I'll do my best to reflect what I heard again. So Trevor, it's great to hear your experience in environmental assessments, understanding the importance of protecting those wetlands and potentially even restoring them. That to do a total review. So you mentioned the importance of making sure you're not just looking at one species, that you're looking at all the species that might be impacted by a project at once, so that you're not having to, you said, get your ducks all in a row. So I love that dual analogy, if you will. Okay. And then from you, Jennifer, I heard we have to consider the microclimates between each of our wards, if you will, that there is a one size fits all policy that applies. Snow plowing where it is unnecessary is probably not logical going forward. What species should we be planting? That's music to my ears. Hearing that we're looking at native species is wonderful. Understanding that affordability and water protection are not always hand in hand, and we need to think about how those very important issues of protecting our water is considered first and foremost in the decisions we make, and that we're pushing system limits. That's really important for people to hear and understand, that we can't potentially flush our system properly annually. And then lastly, just that climate policy is logical policy. And, if it's important for us to shift that language to make sure that people understand that's where we're headed, that's what you want to make sure that you articulate. I hope that was sufficient. Okay, so next question. We'll go back your way, Jennifer. So will you commit to dedicating budget dollars towards protecting Calgary's biodiversity and improving wildlife safety in urban environments, including those through measurements such as enforcing bird-friendly building standards, retrofitting existing structures, and supporting safe wildlife corridors? Thank you.
Yeah, this is one where I have to mind my level, because building code is the province, but at the same time we can do the education piece of how residents can put stickers on their window to mitigate this. You can use red lights in your neighborhood, because at that same time I also have to juggle community safety. And so red lights may not necessarily work for someone who's differently abled in a community and still feel safe. So there are times where when a light goes out in your community, I get a lot of emails for the safety from women and young families. And so we have to balance that need of safety through directional lighting is a great way to help prevent that reflection. We've switched to LEDs, and in some senses having the defective purple light has helped with some of this, I think. When I look at some of those building out in our communities, they have done migratory pattern studies and are trying to look at both for birds and wildlife where buildings are placed in order to allow that movement to happen safely throughout the community. We look at depending, again, not just birds, but we have a lot of other wildlife where it's, again, educating. If you want to make sure the wild animals are safe, don't leave food out so that they actually stay safer away from the city and can deal with predatory. In Ward 2, we've seen issues where we had a large rabbit population and then came the predators, and then as the rabbits died off, the predators went away, and you see this like ebb and flow of wildlife through a suburban community that's on the edge of the city. It's about juggling a lot of that. I'm trying to think what else we got in this one. So it's about, for me, it's more about focusing on balancing what the community conversation is that's coming in through my town halls, and because when I have my town halls, I get the both, like how are we protecting all these and keeping everybody safe and the wildlife, and also making logical policy. So it's a community conversation that shapes policy for me in my office.
Wonderful. Okay, Trevor, you're next, please.
Yeah, just talking about the rabbits. I know a few years ago we had a cold spell like in February where it was -30 for about 3 weeks, and then that seemed to make all the rabbits disappear. They're starting to come back now, but some of the neighbors I've talked to previously, they still see like predators. Like we even had a bobcat in our neighborhood as well. So I don't think it's just the rabbits, but well, there's other things as well that they could be munching on. But one of the things I wanted to focus on with biodiversity is that city has a limited budget. There's lots of things that we must do and lots of nice to haves. So, balancing the budget and the priorities, that's kind of one of the big thing. We don't want to try to do everything at once, but try to spend the money where we're making the most impact. And, one of the questions was asking about bird-friendly design standards. Like one of the things we could do is when have scheduled maintenance, that's when we could do some upgrades for that. So kind of, planning ahead with maintenance. And then for the safe wildlife corridors, using a cheaper, low cost, like interventions like signage or fencing, something that we can do here in Ward 2 that makes an impact. And, biodiversity is very important to Ward 2. We do have quite a bit of wildlife compared to some of the other communities. So, it's a foundation of our community, and I'd like to protect it through, through city council, making sure that we're advocating for Ward 2. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so I heard that building codes is actually provincial jurisdiction, so that's interesting. So you'd be focused more, Jennifer, on an education angle to this, so that people understand what they can do in their own personal lives, rather than potentially what the province might provide them in terms of direction. That's interesting to hear that direction lighting, people find that purple is better than a red. It's less, it sounds like, intimidating or something for community members. I heard that we know we have to think about the way that we behave, and if we leave food out, we can draw a lot of rodents and then other predators when we do so. So just being really mindful about the way we operate, it does matter. So I appreciate that. And that protection is a broad discussion for you. It's not just about protection of biodiversity, but also people with it too, and making sure that that's thought of together. Trevor, it's nice to hear. I didn't know that Ward 2 has a ton of wildlife and biodiversity, so that's really cool that you think it's foundational to the community, that it's preserved and protected and potentially restored. Yeah, I've also noticed rabbits disappearing. It's been quite scary. So yes, and more bobcats, which I hear they're actually doing quite well with the changes that we're seeing in the environment. Yeah, just that you want to make sure that we have a focused budget that is making the most impact for the right amount of dollars, and that you want to schedule these changes, potential bird safety changes with scheduled maintenance planning. That would be really helpful to make sure that we make use of that.
Yeah, just focus on the low-hanging fruit first. So there's lots of opportunities. So
right. Great. Okay, so going into our fourth question. So this will start with you, Trevor. So what steps would you take to ensure housing, rent, and transit in Calgary are affordable and accessible so that more Calgarians can access services with dignity and live and work in a healthy city? Thank you.
Yeah, one of the big things here in Ward 2, it's been expanding quite a bit to the north, and city infrastructure hasn't really kept up with the expansion of the communities. So not too many, a lot of people drive in Ward 2 just because it's so spread out. For myself, it's a 5-minute drive to get to the train station, but on the bus it takes about 45 minutes. So what I typically do when I go downtown, I drive to the Crowfoot station and then take the LRT down. So one of the things that's very difficult, there's lots of new immigrants that are coming up into the northern part of Ward 2. So they don't necessarily have transportation per se, where it's a bit more difficult to get to where they need to go. So, kind of expanding, transit development, but we also need to combine affordability and sustainability together. So when we're actually, wanting to expand into the northern part of Ward 2, it's an opportunity to look at low emissions for GHG on how we're actually, expanding the infrastructure to the north. Regarding rent, there's opportunities to look at rent stabilization tools and tenant protections because rent has been going up quite a bit where a lot of people can't afford. So, looking to balance the housing security, but with market viability. So, just to make sure that people have a safe place to live as well. So kind of the overall focus is just to prioritize solutions that reduce emissions and improve access to individuals, but also, taking into account, not overextending the city's budget as well. So.
Great. Thank you. Jennifer?
Thanks. Okay, so for transit, I've been able to increase transit on demand for new communities and build out because we don't, as the community builds out, you don't have enough people populating a route, as well as the network hasn't been built out. So you think Glacier, Ambleton, we now have transit on demand out there. The route ahead strategy is failing Ward 2. So in that strategy, they wanted more frequent transit, but they're making people walk further. Unfortunately, that works in the end, or unfortunately for Ward 2, we don't have bridge transport. So like when you're in the inner city and you have to go further, you can rent a Lime scooter and get between your bus stops quicker. Whereas the same extension of a distance in Ward 2 or the outer suburb communities, you have to walk it because we don't get those share scooters. It's also why I put, when I first got into office, I made riding your bicycle, you can put it on a C-train all the time, because I knew that residents in Ward 2, especially in our new communities, were riding their bikes down to transit and they were being limited from riding the C-train early in the morning. And yet that was part of their commute. Again, because the bus is not servicing our community. We're spending too much time talking about whether we should buy EV buses, which we have, that's not working. The battery plants that we've spent billions of dollars in are all not operational, and that's leading to delays. I need more buses on my road, which will get people out of their cars, which will have a better impact rather than getting everybody across Canada in a waiting line for a technology that's not working. I hosted an Alberta municipalities panel where the cities who came before us who had done this talked about more about hydrogen or compressed natural gas because it made more sense to keep the buses on the road than the breakdowns they were dealing with the push of EV busing. So I want my citizens to not be waiting for a bus that's broken down. I want them to be on the bus getting to where they need to go. When it comes to rent caps, the municipality cannot set that. Again, that's a provincial jurisdiction. So we cannot be like saddling city council. And as much as councillors want to help with this, that jurisdictional nightmare prevents us from doing that. Even when you want to try and create a landlord education platform and a registry, you're still getting struggles and delays to accomplish that because we're edging that boundary of provincial responsibility and council. Like if you look to our neighbors to the west, BC, they have rent caps, they have limits on how high you can raise rents each month, but that's all set by the province and not by a municipality, because it has to apply to all municipalities, not just ones who opt into it. So housing affordability for the control of that is more difficult. As council, we did blanket zoning. We tried to make inclusive zoning work for everybody. Unfortunately, we've seen some increase. I was able to get a tiered response because I know Ward 2 residents are very car dependent. And so I managed to get past an increased parking calculation so that if that does happen here, you're going to get your parking spot so that you can either park your car as we add the density. Although realistically, when you look at Ward 2, anything north of Stony Trail is already being built from day one with row houses with higher density apartments than what we're seeing in Kensington and the inner city. I have 15-story towers going up that were planned at the original outline plan that are bringing people in, which is why I'm so frustrated that those buses are not stopping in front of those build-outs, because this is where people are coming to settle in our outer ring, and the services need to start following, which is something I've been advocating and pushing for the last 4 years. Oh, and accessibility. Accessibility is one where we're trying to make sure that if you build a city for families, you build it for all abilities. If you're pushing a stroller as a young mom and you can get in and on a C-train without that getting stuck, you're also making sure that someone in a wheelchair will be able to get on and off. It's making sure administration is listening to citizens. I had a resident who came to my office because the PA systems on the buses were not announcing the stops because they were blind. And so we had to go into administration and say, you got to pump up the volume because this is making it harder for those who are differently able to access transit safely and not miss their stops. And so advocacy comes from, yes, administration may tell you have a policy, but it's taking those real life scenarios and going back on administration to say, you have to be better. You can't just tell council this is what it is, when I have citizens coming and saying, it's not working.
Right. Thank you. Okay. So I'll back up for Trevor's responses. So I heard that expansion hasn't met the demand for public transport, that you yourself can drive to downtown in 5 minutes, but to take the transit takes you about 45. So, and that requires you to drive to Crowfoot. So there is limited transportability for the needs of the area. You mentioned there's a lot of people without driving capability, and so it is causing a lot of congestion that way, or confusion perhaps. That you want to make sure that we're looking at low emissions in terms of those future planning of public infrastructure. Rent stabilization tools, what can the city do within its jurisdiction? Matching buildings with needs, so making sure that we are building out for the needs of our city in terms of affordability. And lastly, like your focus is balancing three things: emissions, access, so decreasing emissions, increasing access, and making sure that we're staying within budget. So those are the three things I heard from you. From you, Jennifer, I heard that you have worked hard to make sure that you've increased route and met demand as best as possible in Ward 2. You do acknowledge that you're waiting for those population numbers to come up so that there is the ability to get those solid routes in there for people. You mentioned that rent caps are outside of the jurisdiction of the city. And so what are the steps that can be taken to work with housing, making sure that you're listening to your constituents and looking at the needs of families and what they require when you're making your planning, and that you want to make sure that parking is available and that everyone has accessibility, both people, for example, that are deaf or otherwise, those things. Okay, so next question is around ENMAX. So ENMAX is wholly owned by the city of Calgary. What role do you see for ENMAX in helping this city achieve its 2035 clean electricity goals? I'll start with you, Jennifer.
Thanks. So again, ENMAX being a regulated industry, it does make it harder for us to say, oh, council directs you to do this. We also have regulatory requirements because ENMAX owns a U.S. energy company, which means political officials cannot be a part of it due to U.S. federal regulation. But when I look, and you also have the fact that we're the shareholder, but ENMAX has its own governance structure and they respond to their own board. And their own board has actually worked, and you can go to their website and see their plans that they are bringing forward. And they're under the pressure of managing a growing Alberta, because we're one of the provinces that's seen a net influx of individuals, which is seeing an exponential growth on energy usage. We also have the challenge where we want to build these server farms and Bitcoin farms, which are just AI is so gluttonous on the production as we become more tech focused. So it's extremely challenging to hold the duality of what we want as a society. At the same time, we're so used to flipping on a light switch, and you can see it when we've had brownouts because of the demand on our system. Again, the investment has to be spread out on our entire provincial grid when it comes to the growth. Transformers, over the last 4 years, this council transformer delays in procurement were like 2 years. So then when you want to do a solar array on a house, the transformer of the neighborhood limits the ability for communities to put solar on, because you can't over build, or you're going to blow your transformer. You also have the challenge of our grid systems were originally designed for one-way transmission flow, and now we're going multi-directional. But anyone who's learned about it, you have energy loss just in this setup, which is why when you look to California, they do solar panels into battery banks off the side of the house. Or if you could plug in, if you're an EV owner, if you could plug in your car and charge off your solar, that goes into it. But as much as we've had people switch and put solar into the grid, if it's not consumed at the time it's going in, it's being lost. So while we hand out certifications of saying you produce this much solar, there's no battery bank storage for it. So it's just poof, it's gone. So I'm really struggling as someone who governs with this pressure to say we're doing all this great work, but in the reality, if you're not storing it and you're just saying you're producing it by issuing a piece of paper, it's not worth the paper it's written on. And so as someone who governs ENMAX, that they've done the shift, but they are very much focused on trying to do meaningful output for Calgarians and our city, while making sure that their foundation is that you can turn on, that your house is powered and that you don't lose your lights. And there is a big struggle with our network on the age of infrastructure in the province of Alberta that is going to come at a cost. And you're seeing it sort of in your fees, and we have to juggle both and transition in a phased, smart, intelligent approach to keep everybody with the expectation that they want from an energy company. And so that's the fun conversation with this one.
Yeah, great. Go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, one of the big things with ENMAX is there's opportunities for some investment. As mentioned, the grid could be updated, but with renewables, one of the targets is 10% renewables, and then the 2030 target, they're looking at 40% of total electricity used in Calgary as renewables. So I don't know if they're proposing to put a whole bunch of hydroelectric dams and wind farms here in the middle of the city, which is not, as a joke, that's not going to happen. So the only opportunity is on solar. And, Jennifer kind of highlighted a lot of the big issues with solar, where it needs to be used right away. The battery banks aren't the best. So kind of the goals that are proposed in this 5-year 2050 plan, I'm not sure if too much thought was put into that specific aspect on how we're going to actually keep renewables, but there is opportunity for renewables outside of Calgary within Alberta. And a lot of the, for emissions purposes, a lot of the coal fire power plants have been converted to natural gas, where that was, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 50% for the facilities. So opportunities right now the price of electricity is very low. So there's not too much incentives right now for the power companies within Alberta to be producing full out on electricity. So there is some leverage where we could be producing more electricity within Alberta. And one of the things that different electricity companies are looking at is trying to bring in some of the AI infrastructure next to the facilities where it's actually, using some of the unused electricity. So, but from a renewable point of view, I see that there's limited capacity within the city, besides solar. So.
Awesome. Okay, so from you, Jennifer, I heard that this Jeremy, that was the first time I learned about the fact that we own a U.S. Energy company through ENMAX, which is surprising to me. I heard you say that it's got its own governance structure and its own board. I know former members have served on the board before. That's something that is interesting to me, anyway. Yeah, thank you for saying the energy, gluttony of these large AI farms and potential Bitcoin farms. These are things that we have to look at, and especially from a water perspective, the impact of these things on our and what that means relative to our use as individuals. Thank you for acknowledging that. I think, like you said, investment needs to be fair across the province, making sure that transformers are accessible so that you guys can actually meet these targets, and that the system is switching from a centralized system to a more distributive system. So that's something to really think about in the terms of the switch. And wow, I totally forgot I've got solar panels, and I keep forgetting that energy is going to waste when it's not being used. So yeah, to get those battery storage systems in place makes so much sense for our city to come a long way. Okay, so Trevor, from you, I heard that you again are looking closely at the numbers that the city has proposed. So those 10%, 40%, 60% renewable expectations is then, and you're thinking it is mostly coming from solar, and you want to make sure that this battery aspect is considered as well in that process. That emissions that you are appreciating the need for us to reduce emissions by converting to other things, but that the pricing is low and that it is challenging for some producers right now. I think there's something to be said in that. China has switched to producing and non-producing contract, so that if they want coal companies to not be producing, they're shut in, so that's helpful. But they still get paid for doing that. So this is something to think about in that conversion. And that, maybe AI could be put with some facilities that would potentially reduce the load on those things. Okay, so next question is, how will you advance sustainable water use and watershed protection in Calgary's growth and development decisions? Trevor, you can lead this one. Thanks.
Yeah, so this is water security is a long-term challenge, and we need to think about, scalable solutions on how we're actually going to deal with this. So one of the things I'd be advocating for as city council is, clear cost-effective water efficiency standards and new developments. Integrated. We want to focus early on in the process to be able to, do that without having to convert down the road. So think about the long-term solution, not just we need additional capacity, but how the impact is, thinking long-term. One of the opportunities as well, and I believe the city is looking into this already, is to more on green stormwater infrastructure. And that's, once again, that's not a one size fits all throughout the city of Calgary, but just focus on individual wards, on certain areas, on how we can implement that green stormwater infrastructure, because it's different plants. And that'll reduce on the strain on watersheds, and also lower maintenance costs because it's a natural solution. One of the big things as well is collaborating on watershed sharing agreements and conservation targets, because water is becoming more scarce each year. So to kind of do some long-term planning on where the water is going to be coming from, and try to avoid what we've been dealing with lack of water and water restrictions. So kind of planning long-term where the water is going to be coming from. So with water stewardship, my experience is it's not just supply, but it's also about land use, infrastructure, and then, mutual agreements. Because a lot of our water comes up from, more towards the Banff area where there's a whole bunch of hydroelectric dams. And that's one of the ways that the water is being maintained, not just for electricity, but also to keep the reservoirs full. So, having those conversations and long-term planning on where the water is going to be coming from will be very helpful for the city going forward.
Right. Thank you. Okay, Jennifer.
Thanks. I think provincial water licenses have definitely been a conversation, and well, yes, we've had some municipalities enter into sharing agreements, especially in southern Alberta. It was fine when it was a perception that it was going to be short term, but if it ever were to be longer term, I don't think you would see municipalities be as cooperative, because we haven't necessarily looked at the provincial movement of water as for municipalities and the growth we're seeing throughout this entire province, both balancing industry, farming needs, and what does that look like. I think we need to invest some more in our farming practices to help with watering the fields and storage, so that because they take up a lot of water licenses. And then you have outside city limits where we're seeing a lot more industrial growth. But if you're going to set up shop outside the city of Calgary, if you want to share our infrastructure, I think we're going in a direction where we're expecting them to have their own water license. We're on the cusp of this shift. At the city of Calgary, I've been pushing for more accountability. When we have a water loss rate of 22% in our current infrastructure, that's unacceptable. In my mind, that's 22% of the water that is flowing through our pipes that has been treated, going back into the ground. That's at a time could be very substantive when you think about drought conditions. So I'm trying to get the city to fast track and see it as a more important need for a response, because if you can reduce your water loss in your infrastructure, you have water that is just being used by people and not just being lost around the pipe. That makes a difference in drought conditions. And we've had a heavy rain summer, so that helped us a lot, but you can't predict the weather. Like I'm not psychic, so I just want to make sure the infrastructure works. I think that for water, when you look at new communities, they're getting installed with higher efficiency appliances, which is really helpful. Where we see gaps is if you look at some of the inner city, you may have the toilet that's original of the house that was built in the 1950s. That's where you have to get the education campaigns going, like put a brick in your toilet if you don't have the budget to actually replace it. And water-wise tips, check for leaky pipes or leaky toilets. Like these are the things where it's that partnership of the municipality acknowledging the weaknesses of the systems and helping citizens learn or teach the tips and tricks. Because if we don't have this partnership of the citizen responsibility with the municipal responsibility, we're both pulling in different directions and we go nowhere. And the city can't go into every single person's home to help check unless that person wants us to come in and educate. So it's a joint partnership to fix water loss and report it and solve this problem. So partnerships.
Wonderful. Okay, so I heard from you, Trevor, that water security is a long-term challenge, that we need to be looking at efficiency standards in new development and look at making sure that green storm water infrastructure is baked into the city's planning across the board, let's say. That you want to make sure that this could lower maintenance costs. And in fact, Jennifer, I can add, you said that as well, talking about growing instead of mowing kind of thing. So yeah, I'm just going to add that in there. And then also sharing knowledge or understanding knowledge from the watershed council groups and incorporating that into the city's planning. So making sure that watershed stewardship is a part of the city's purview. that it's not just about water use, it's about land use and mutual agreements, these big mutual agreements that are, for example, power plants upstream of us at scale are really important to understand in terms of the city's access to fresh water long term. And then Jennifer, you spoke about sharing agreements being something that cannot be a solution long term, that there's going to need to be a real consideration. I just learned that this, in terms of licensing, the municipalities are sort of last in line, not first and right, first in time, but last in line. So very important that that's understood to be something that needs to be considered for a person that's going to be elected or reelected. And then that industry and farming is the biggest water use in our watershed, and we need to understand those things at scale when we make decisions. Thank you for that. Understanding that we're losing water, what can we do about our infrastructure, and making sure that there is this mutual understanding of what we all need to work towards as citizens and municipal leaders. So I've captured that. Okay, so last question. We made it. So I believe, Jennifer, I start with you, please. How will you ensure recommendations from Calgarians, including residents, frontline communities, environmental groups, and city staff, are meaningfully considered in council decisions? Thank you.
So part of this is my town halls. When I host a town hall, I bring city administration out. When the feeder main broke, I had 2 general managers attend this event where citizens get to ask questions. You just come in, you put your hand up, you get a microphone, and you can ask whatever you want to city administration or myself. So administration knows that what citizens in Ward 2 think and want to have accomplished, they're seeing it firsthand. And then also it helps when I'm in chambers, bringing up the questions and holding them to account of, like, what Ward 2 has said. We made an agreement in the room of this is the steps we were hoping to see. And so there's a dual accountability with having an open forum town hall. Another piece is, like, again, as vice chair of audit, I've been able to get good reports that showcase the areas of improvement the city needs to take on. And we create metrics of check-ins and accountabilities that are really important for the city as overall. I currently have some infrastructure that's going to report back to, or infrastructure reports that are going to report back to IPC, as well, potentially back to audit for a check-in, so that our citizen members who are from constituents of Calgary sit on audit and give, again, another public input on the reports and work at city. I think it's really just about being as transparent as possible with citizens, because to make our city the best city we currently have, and I think is the best city in Canada and the world, it comes from collaboration. I find Ward 2 is full of very intelligent people who come with criticisms and ideas to fix the problem. So I recognize that, and I make sure that administration is aware of those solutions.
Wonderful. Trevor, please.
Yeah, I've been to a few of the town halls, and kind of the observation from a few people is, like, it's not a true representation of all of Ward 2. There's lots of new immigrants that are coming in that don't really have a voice. They're not, they could be permanent residents, but they're not citizens of Canada, so they're not able to vote. So, the Ward 2 conversations with the town halls are, pretty repetitive, and a lot of the conversation was, we brought this up 9 months ago, nothing was done. The response from Jennifer was, well, I brought it forward to council, nothing was done. Like, I wasn't heard. So one of the things for, focusing on community is we need to be more transparent, on the decision making. Like, for myself, it might be public on how much we spent on the water main repairs, but I've looked, I didn't find any specific information on that. So it could have been hidden away somewhere, but I couldn't find anything specific. And we want to make sure that we're accessible to, like, the new communities. Like, people might not be speaking English as their first language, and they might not understand how the system works here in Calgary. So Ward 2 is a very big community. Lots of people have English as their second language. So we need to be able to reach out properly, so to make sure that we hear their voices. So And for myself, I've done a lot of stakeholder engagement on environmental issues and building new facilities. So it's very important to hear what people have to say, the public. So on the rezoning issue, just seeing that 60 some percent of the people that went to council said, no, we don't want it. But, and then for whatever reason, city council supported it and basically wasted 15 days of people speaking just to be able to say no. So, the city really needs to be able to listen to people, and the city needs to be able, the individuals need to be able to trust city council to be able to actually have their voice heard and feel like it's heard, not just thank you for your comment and then ignore it. And, just being able to follow up with communities. It's easy enough to say, I listened, I heard you, but are you actually following up with what was brought forward? So, thank you.
Okay, so I'll recap and then I'll let you guys close with anything that you'd like to add or that you want to make sure you cover before we wrap. So Jennifer, you said you really want to use these town halls as a continued way of connecting with Ward 2 and making sure that you connect your residents with the staff and that everybody can ask the questions that they are there to ask. That you want this dual accountability understanding between your residents and you. That as the vice chair of audit, you make sure that there's regular check-ins and that regular accountability between all members. Transparency is really important to you. Collaboration between your ward members, even if they're bringing forward criticisms, you want to hear it as well as ideas. Trevor has attended some of these and is concerned about the representation of the membership in those meetings. He also values transparency and accessibility for all the members, really thinks very strongly about stakeholder engagement processes. The example being the rezoning issue, making sure that when people put in a bunch of time to show up for council, that everybody feels that they understand why the outcomes came as they did. So I'm going to stop there and say a big thank you to both of you for this. This is super helpful. And maybe just because we've been honoring this direction, I'll let you lead, Trevor, and then Jennifer, you can have the final word. Go ahead, Trevor, with any final thoughts.
Yeah, I really appreciate this opportunity to reach out and have the conversation. So, environmental aspects is, very important to myself, but I know you need to be able to balance, all the priorities within city council. So, focus on the must-haves and then make sure that we're listening to the community throughout Ward 2 and across the city on what best way that we can spend our budget. What is our priorities? Make sure that we're aligned on where we want to spend the money on and not just make a blanket decision on, well, this works in this ward, let's do it across the city. So just focus on where we can make our most value for our money and make sure that we're focusing on what can work in each individual ward. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, Jennifer, final word, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I think a lot of people think city council is a yes, no, and that's it. And it's not. It's yes, no, plus amendments. And so I've showed my community, I listen to them and I have conversations. If you reach out to my office, you always get a phone call. Phone call is always offered and it's up to you to decide if you want to engage in that phone call. My town halls, I'm surprised you say that because I hear from new Calgarians and new Canadians and they get treated equally and get the same voice as whether you can vote for or not in this election. I show my community on a yes or a no vote, but I also add amendments for the climate declaration. There is a current amendment that was passed to measure, monetize, and manage to make sure that when Calgarians are getting outputs for budgeting and administration is still trying to figure out how to measure, monetize, and manage, that we know if we're making more money or not. The climate declaration, emergency declaration, Calgary, or the city spent $200 million and got $287 million back by just having a declaration in place. It's about understanding that when Calgarians come in, and a lot of people did show up for blanket voting, a lot of the comments were, there were concerns about parking requirements. There were concerns about density. And the way I showed Calgarians that I listened to them is I made sure that the amendments got passed. We now have a tiered blanket zoning where if you live in an outer ring community where we're already seeing higher density built out communities, there is a higher parking requirement. So if you were to tear down a single family house and put in a 3-plex with 3 main units and 3 secondary suites, you're required to have 6 units of parking because a lot of residents in Ward 2 were concerned about parking access. And so I got that passed, and the City of Calgary never counted secondary suites as density for a neighborhood. And with that amendment that passed with the blanket zoning vote, we now count secondary suites in density of calculation, which allows us to look at the infrastructure requirements. I think passing a 10-year capital plan off of my motion is allowing the City of Calgary to start progressing in the right direction, where we're now not looking at 4-year budget cycles or 4-year budget plans with 1-year budget. We're now looking at 10-year capital investing. And these are things that I have been able to accomplish with this conversation, support, and logic of representing Ward 2.
Wonderful. Again, thank you both so much for being here. This has been a pleasure meeting you both. Well, meeting you again, Jennifer, and meeting you, Trevor. Good luck to the both of you. I know this is a lot of work, so thank you again for running, for aiming to represent Ward 2. And I'm going to let you both off the hook and close with some housekeeping. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, so just to remind you guys, please use the QR code in the corner. Make sure that you get this out to your candidates. There are 2, I believe, candidates from Ward 2 that I haven't heard from yet. So if you are in Ward 2, use the new mode tool and get that questionnaire off to your candidates. Let's also, sorry, I'm just going to put that in the chat. So it is in the chat for this conversation. Please use it. And so amplify it by sharing it with your friends. View the responses on my website. Again, I will add the link for that for you here. And please, so 25 responses so far. There's definitely more people that we want to hear from. Thrilled that the mayoral candidate forum is going ahead. We have commitment from your top 2 candidates, Jody and Jeremy. Looking forward to speaking to you both, and hopefully the top 5 candidates for mayor. And lastly, please check out the YouTube scheduled for tomorrow. I'm going to meet with your Ward 3 candidates. So I have 2 of them lined up for you tomorrow. Again, let your other candidates know that you want to hear from them as well. And lastly, please remember to like and subscribe to the Gravity Well. Together, we can build a resilient and healthy and sustainable city for all Calgarians. Thank you so much for your time.